the third thing you can do to level up your mind, the third most important thing to do to level up your mind is to get familiar with and start using mental models. And the mental model is basically the system that you use to defeat biases. So, like we've established, right, your brain is constantly biased and it can't be trusted essentially. And even knowing about biases doesn't help. That doesn't solve the problem. So what you need to deploy specific tools in order to counter your bias. And that's what a mental model is. And to this, I also want to say, that you look for definitions of mental models, like a lot of people seem to have slightly different definitions of what it is. So let me just clarify what to me a mental model is. It is any thinking strategy that you deliberately deploy in a specific situation. So you say, okay, here's a specific kind of decision I want to make, and I'm going to deploy a tool for how to think about this. Or here's a specific problem I want to solve, and I'm going to deploy a specific problem-solving tool for this. And that is the most important thing, is that you deliberately deploy a system. Because what we do otherwise is, we go, oh, here's this problem. How do we solve it? And what you do, you kind of follow your intuition. You follow the thoughts that bubble up in your mind, which are biased to all hell, right? And so you have to not do that and instead be like, okay, I know that if I just sit here and think about this, it's going to be a disaster. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply this specific tool. And again, let's do just a couple of examples of what does a mental model look like. Let's start with one of the easiest ones, which is the idea of inversion or a process of elimination. So instead of thinking something like, okay, I have a goal, I want to reach some kind of a goal, how do I reach this goal? What can I do to reach this goal? That can sometimes be kind of difficult and overwhelming to think about. And often it can be narrow. So how can you find better answers? Well, one way is just to invert the question, be like, well, how would I prevent myself from reaching this goal? Right? What would be an effective way to sabotage my progress towards this goal? And that can often give us one, greater clarity, but also it can show us important answers that we wouldn't have thought of if we hadn't inverted the question. It's very simple, right? And a similar approach is using a process of elimination. So if you say, okay, how do I set a top priority? What should I focus on? What are the most important priorities? It's kind of difficult to think of. Well, one way to solve this, or an approach that's useful to take, is just list everything that you think is important and then start eliminating. So instead of building the list from scratch, you make a list and you start knocking things off the list until only the most important stuff remains.
I like that.
So that's one of the simplest examples of a mental model. A slightly more complex one is using Bayesian probability. And Bayesian probability, we'll link to a great video on this to get like a visual example of what Bayes' theorem is by a channel called 3 Blue 1 Brown or something like that. Really good example of this. But in practical terms, you can deploy Bayesian probability, and it basically goes like this. In order to make some kind of a prediction of a future outcome, what you want to do is you want to get a baseline or a base value and then adjust the baseline with new information. So let me give you an example from a business perspective, right? So let's say I am launching a new product and the last product launch didn't go so well. And I go, well, I hope this one goes better. That's not a great strategy, right? Right away, it's like, okay, well, yeah, you hope it goes better, but is it going to go better?
Of course you do.
So you want to be able to make some kind of prediction. Well, is this going to go better? And what can we do to make this go better? And not just like hope for it. Now, the wrong way to do this is to just be optimistic and we'll try extra hard and that's why it's going to go better. No. What you want to do is, one, grab a baseline. So your baseline is a past performance. And in this case, it's very easy. Well, what did the last product launch do? That's our baseline. That we will start reasoning from there instead of just optimistically saying, oh, I bet we'll make at least 10,000 sales. Like, where does that come from? You just want that to be true, right? But
made that up.
Yeah, but if your last product launch, you made 1,000 sales, that's your baseline. Okay, that you can start reasoning from there. And then from there, you can ask yourself, well, what are we doing differently? You can say, well, we have whatever, we've increased our ad budget by such and such amount. We've increased our ad budget by 20%. How much is this going to affect this launch? Is it going to double the sales? Well, probably not, right? I can take the baseline and bump it up by 20%. That's reasonable. Okay. And we can say, well, okay, we're doing more of this kind of marketing. And again, you can ask yourself, what's this going to do? Is this going to double our sales? Is this going to bump the value up by 10% or whatever? But also be realistic. Well, because last launch didn't go well, we had to fire half of our marketing department. So we have to adjust the baseline downwards from that realistically.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And again, it's simply, even if you're just guessing, but a series of guesses, a series of informed guesses like that will get you often surprisingly close to the correct answer. And whereas kind of going by your gut feeling or hoping, you can be orders of magnitude off of the correct answer. And so this is a very specific, and this is especially that first step is going, what is my baseline? What am I reasoning from that can make a huge difference? So that would be Bayesian probability. And then we've already mentioned the sunk cost fallacy, right? Where a typical mistake is where people will keep investing in something just because they've already invested in it. And for this, you can use the revolving doors mental model, which is like, imagine that whatever the situation is, imagine that you just walked in on this as a completely new person. So for a business decision, it's like, imagine that you were just hired as the new CEO or the new manager or whatever. You don't know any of the people who work here. You have no attachment to the work that's already been done. Look at the situation and make a decision, right? Because if you're looking at it from your perspective, you go, well, we've tried so hard. We've worked so hard on this. We've spent so much money on this and so on. But if you've just been hired, you look at it and go, wow, you guys have been wasting your time for the last 2 years. Let's stop doing that, because you don't care. You're not attached, right? And the same, or kind of a similar aspect. So this is very useful for kind of strategic decisions, entrepreneurial decisions, this kind of thing. A kind of similar approach or a similar effect that you can do for personal decisions is basically think about what if you'd have to advise a friend. So you're struggling with some issue, and your ability to make good decisions about that issue is limited by how close you are to the problem, right? Because you're you and you've been suffering from this problem and so on. But if you ask yourself, what if a good friend of mine came to me with this exact problem? What would I advise them to do? So, whatever that is, someone's like tortured about, they're stuck in a difficult relationship or something, and they're like, oh, should I leave, or should I try this, or should I try that? Often, if you take the perspective of what if my friend came to me and told me exactly this, he told me, listen, this is my relationship situation. This is what's been going on. This is how I feel about it, etc. What should I do? Often you'll just immediately know what needs to be done.